All right, we're going to stay with that reshuffle. I'll explain why it matters, because it's just another sign that Labor's setting up for an early election. Now, I am not saying they will go early. That decision won't yet have been made, and anyone who says they know what's happening, well, they don't know anything about politics or elections. But what the reshuffle says to me is the Prime Minister's clearly wanting all options on the table to go before the economy gets worse, and that's what this reshuffle will give him. It's an attempt at a brand refresh, a chance to clear out the ministers who are demonstrably failing, like Andrew Giles and Clare O'Neil, and to put more firepower in place in key portfolios, like immigration, which will be one of the big battlegrounds at the next election. Hence, Giles and O'Neil are out to try and blunt the opposition's attack on border protection and all those failures in immigration detention. It's why, too, they've put Tony Burke in to try and mop up the mess and return fire on the coalition. But the move of Burke out of industrial relations and into immigration is not just about Giles and O'Neil. It's also about preempting the attack against Burke over the CFMEU and Burke's capitulation to union demands that the building watchdog be abolished. In both portfolios now, immigration and IR, the response to criticism from Peter Dutton will be, that was then, this is now, and all the usual spin outlining all the moves the new ministers are making to turn things around. For close to a year, Labor's polling has been in freefall. Pretty much since the Prime Minister's diabolical result on The Voice, Labor's primary vote has languished in the low 30s, and the Prime Minister's own personal ratings have dived into negative territory. Today, the trend has been against a Labor majority and settled into a position at best that looks like there'll be a minority government outcome. So Labor sharing power with either the Greens or what I regard as their well-heeled sister party, the Teals. In recent weeks, it's even got worse for Labor, with the last few polls showing the opposition in front, including today's Redbridge poll in the Daily Telegraph that's got the coalition leading on two-party preferred, 51.5%, to Labor's 48.5%. So the prospect for the Prime Minister is not just minority government with the support of the Greens or the Teals, but actual defeat. The commentariat still regard a one-term government as unthinkable, which is good for Peter Dutton because that makes him the underdog. But the biggest reason for the Prime Minister to go early is to avoid opinions hardening against his government, which they're likely to do, given that the government's got no answer to cost of living other than more handouts, which is robbing Peter to pay Paul, and voters tend to see through that anyway. The reshuffle is significant for another reason too. Not so much the personnel changes here, which are about replacing some inadequate ministers with other inadequate ministers, but what I was looking at closely was the administrative changes, which reflect Labor's leftist instincts and are unlikely to improve the quality of our government. The whole point of creating a Home Affairs Ministry, like the American Department of Homeland Security and the British Home Office as well, was to ensure that domestic security issues didn't fall between the administrative cracks. Hence, immigration, Border Force, the Australian Federal Police and ASIO were all under the one ministerial and bureaucratic roof. Ultimately, the same ministers and same officials were responsible for all of it. Hence, the usual blame game was limited. And so you ended up with someone directly responsible when things went wrong. And that's essential for good government, that someone is accountable for failure. Now, the fact this doesn't happen enough in modern politics is part of the problem we have at present. Yet all that accountability, well, that's now gone with these changes from yesterday, meaning that under this Prime Minister, we're back to the old Labor way where no one's ever to blame for anything except the former government. Not a single minister in this reshuffle has been booted to the backbench, because this Prime Minister is unwilling to make any internal enemies that sacking someone creates. In any event, it's not even the Prime Minister in Labor who makes the calls. The factional warlords, well, they make the picks. They then tell Albanese who's in his ministry. All the Prime Minister gets to do under Labor is choose the portfolios they get. Hence, this reshuffle has been carefully crafted to maximise the spin, but it won't leave the government any stronger or the country better off. Tony Burke was a CFMEU patsy in workplace relations, and when he was last the Border Protection Minister in the Rudd-Gillard government, there were 83 illegal boats in just 80 days under his watch. And already the Liberals are out with their attack ads on this very point. Now, given the pressure he's under from Islamist activists in his own seat, a tough line on repelling boat people and a push for Australia to take more from Gaza is the last thing we can expect from Burke. He won't stand firm. Claire O'Neil, the minister who couldn't work out how to stop criminals getting out of detention, which is hardly likely to work out how to fix our housing crisis, given she was in charge of our record high migration numbers, and that's a big part of our housing problem. Well, Andrew Giles, if the Prime Minister had a backbone, that bloke would have been punted to the backbench, not merely shifted to the outer ministry as the new skills minister. And as for Julie Collins, going back to the agriculture portfolio she held in opposition, someone who couldn't explain Labor's position on the live sheep trade or wouldn't explain it in terms of Labor visas, well, that shows that Labor disrespects farmers and regional communities.
Labor had a policy of phasing out live sheep exports. Yep. Will you do that? Are you committing to that?
Well, we're going to be making an announcement about a broader animal welfare policy later on in the campaign.
Now that you won't reveal whether Labor will support or carry on with an ag visa, but this visa was announced almost a year ago. Why is it taking so long for Labor to come up with a position on it?
The main priorities that I'm hearing from farmers, their biggest concern is around climate change.
Collins Krishani was asking why it's taking Labor so long to say whether or not you will support the ag visa.
Labor will be making announcements in relation to visas later on in the campaign.
Okay.
Labor then have an alternative policy that if you were to win government, you would immediately be able to action.
I'm very proud of Labor's policies to date, and I'm very proud of the policies that I've been working on with my colleague Christina Keneally in relation to visas.
That question about why it's taking Labor so long to declare its position on the ag visa.
And I'm very proud of the policies Labor's putting forward, and I think that the farmers will be very proud of it, and we'll have more to say well before polling day. I think the farmers and regional Australians will be very pleased with Labor's policies.
I mean, she is hopeless. You can see today why farmers are so angry. In terms of creating a stronger and more responsive government, the pity is the Prime Minister hasn't used the retirements of 2 ministers to reduce the size of Cabinet. Now, at 23, Cabinet is ridiculously unwieldy. No successful business has anything like 23 directors on any board, 23 in Cabinet and just 7 in the outer ministry, when it really should be, 10 to 12 in Cabinet and 18 to 20 in the outer ministry, all of them under pressure to perform in order to get promoted. Instead, the vast number of Cabinet ministers and their bewildering range of portfolios is a function of a weak, every child must have a prize sort of government. Bolshe junior ministers and Bolshe lobby groups are always bought off by Labor by putting their minister into Cabinet and their concerns incorporated into these super long and slightly ridiculous ministerial titles. But operating like this makes Cabinet government unwieldy and ineffectual. It means that no one's really responsible, least of all a weak Prime Minister who's clearly not across the detail. The Prime Minister now will be obsessing over next week's Reserve Bank meeting with any suggestion that inflation will stay high and that rates might go up, adding more pressure to go early to the election before you wake up and our economy gets even worse. So watch this space. I want to hope too that the opposition is ready to go early if and when Labor panics.